Good morning. This is Attorney Karen Jimeno. Yesterday afternoon, the Manila Cathedral church bells tolled for 13 minutes, paying homage to the 13 years that Pope Francis served the 1.4 billion Catholics. Today, we join the world in celebration of the life and times of Pope Francis, here at the forefront. The passing of Pope Francis on Easter Monday marks the end of a transformative era for the Catholic Church. Known for his humility, progressive vision, and tireless dedication to the poor, let's take a look once more at the life and times of Pope Francis. Joining us this morning via Zoom is the president of the Catholic Media Network, the broadcasting arm of CBCP, Father Francis Lucas. Good morning, Father Francis.
A blessed morning and a blessed day, despite the grief that we continue to suffer.
Yes. And Father Francis, what a nice coincidence. You have the same name as Pope Francis. Officially, what is the Vatican's announcement as to the cause of death of Pope Francis?
Based on the report, it was stroke.
Okay, so I think we're having difficulty hearing you clearly, Father Francis, but what we're seeing from the declaration of death is stroke, coma, irreversible cardiovascular collapse. Pope Francis passed away barely 24 hours from the time that he gave his Easter message at the Vatican. Was the CBCP surprised when his death was announced? Because I think a lot of people thought that he was on a road to recovery in terms of health.
Me personally, I was continuously monitoring the news about his health condition. And I saw that the report always goes like this. He's stable on the last stage of his ailment. But they didn't say he's improving. No. So he remains stable on that. It does not mean that he is in better health. Nor did they not say that he's going down in his condition. That's why, based on the cause of death, it was a stroke. Most probably is due to a condition that he cannot keep up with it anymore. It's ailment.
Okay, and Father Francis, this death occurred on Easter, still in Easter in other parts of the world like the U.S. For Catholics, Easter is celebrating the resurrection of Jesus from the dead, which symbolizes victory over death and also the victory of good over evil. What message can Catholics take away from this, or what would be the symbolism of Pope Francis's death on Easter?
The way I see it, he just waited for Easter Sunday to be celebrated with a triduum, and then he went back to his Creator and he died. There's a symbolism here, is what he kept on saying, everything is God. So, in his death, he was already offering himself to God, because he always said, it all depends on God, the right or proper time for him to return to his God. But he never gave up his road as Pope. He never surrendered. He never said, now I resign.
So, Father Francis, it's in your opinion, he waited to deliver that message on Easter before passing away.
Yes, the way it happened, and God blessed him for that.
And Father Francis, I was watching also other international news where they said that Pope Francis was also holding on physically until he was able to finish supervising I think the audit of the accounts for the church. Would you know if this is something that was already accomplished?
I would not know the technically, but what I know is one of the first things he did was to manage the governance of the finances of the Vatican.
Was
So
yeah.
by the time of his death, it's all done.
Okay, that's good to hear, Father Francis. In respect of the Philippines, Filipinos saw Pope Francis a decade ago when he visited Tacloban in 2015 in the aftermath of Yolanda. How did his visit in the Philippines leave a lasting memory for Filipinos, in your opinion?
There are many. Number one is, for me, his visit to Tacloban was really a critical message because imagine they could not decide whether his evidence can go or not because of the strong wind and the typhoon and the rain, but he decided to go. So in the sense, you see, he has a very strong heart in bringing the message of hope to everybody. So he went there, nakakapote siya. He was ready a plastic kapote. Wow, for me, His Holiness is really there. Kasi nila given him a special raincoat and people really protecting him. Yes, they tried to do that. And he said so many wonderful things during his visit in Tacloban. And based on reports that I got, his plane barely made it out of the place of Tacloban. At least one of the three airplanes was left behind. Imagine the Pope being holed up in Tacloban for a few days. But then he showed his love for compassion and mercy, especially those who are in dire straits. And you can see people crying, just seeing him, especially the victim of disaster. And he's done this everywhere in the world. Now, he showed his heart to everybody. And there's no obstacle so big that he won't show his heart to these people. The injustice, the lack of unity, the lack of faith, and the thorough violence that is being inflicted in humanity all over the world. So this is for me very strong. And second is in the Luneta. Imagine those 6 million people, especially very near the stage of Luneta. They will jump back by sardines. They cannot move. And they were there. And I heard so many miracles that happened. Nobody at the time died of stroke. You know, so many people telling me, nagmilagro. Kasi ang sama-sama pakiramdam ko, I really felt so bad. And then suddenly, I can't believe. And nobody can move. They were so jam-packed that it's good, it's raining, that anything that will happen to you is wiped down. So, and there are popular people who even told me about this.
Yeah, Father Francis, I couldn't recall the mass in Luneta, whether it was raining, but I do remember Leyte, wherein he gave the mass when it was all under the rain because there was a typhoon. And I remember thinking when his plane was able to take off from Leyte and the other plane was left behind, we were saying, wow, God was really looking after the Pope. But in Luneta, was it also raining at the time when he held the mass? And we had almost 6 to 7 million Filipinos in attendance.
Well, if you look at the whole affair, many people just slept already in the area so that they will have a stage. But then there was a time when it really rained like cats and dogs, and people were so wet. So they're also part of that. that it did not, that the rain stopped. But then there are also times that the rain was really stopped. It's raining like cats and dogs.
And Father Francis, Filipinos called Pope Francis Lolo Kiko. What was his reaction to this term of endearment, especially if someone explained to him what Lolo means in Tagalog?
I'm sure they did that, and Kiko is a very popular piece on Francisco.
And Father Francis, I know this gets a bit confusing. Father Francis, and then we're talking about Pope Francis. Father Francis, Pope Francis also called the Filipinos Urbi et Orbi, smugglers of faith, bearers of joy. What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, looking at it in a wider context, the popes who visited us before Pope Francis, even Pope Francis, they kept on saying that the Filipinos is there in every nook and corner of the world, and we have 82% Catholics in the Philippines, not including Christians, will be the new inspiration and propagators of the faith all over the world, beginning with Asia. So that is actually the meaning of that. So here we can see that there is a big mission that the popes are asking us to do as Filipinos. And as the Pope said this is the meaning, I'm sure, of Pope Francis. Talking about the world and the city.
Yeah.
Because the city there is Rome and the Vatican. And the other term is the world.
Yeah, I like what he said, smugglers of faith. So we should be bringing faith all across the world.
Yes.
Before his death,
And that's,
yes.
that's why I always say the resurrection could not have happened without sacrifice, without suffering. And the way the Philippines are undergoing for ages, many problems and suffering, it has to ease when we start accomplishing or implementing our faith, propagating that first in the Philippines and worldwide.
And Father Francis, before his death, Pope Francis gave instructions on how his funeral should go. Can you give us an idea what were the wishes of Pope Francis when it comes to his funeral and the arrangements for his coffin and everything else in terms of how the world should celebrate or hold his funeral?
What I got as information is he just wanted a simple funeral and a wake. Number one here is the coffin, because he just wants a simple coffin made of wood. Because before, you have the wood and then the lead and then the cypress or the oak that are 3 layers. But he said, no. Because he said, he is not the master of everything. He's just a person who serves, ordinary. So he does not want a pompous funeral and the wake. So that's what he wanted. And the way I see it, he may not wear the usual red vestment, but just the white vestment.
Is the red vestment, Father Francis, more, as we say in Tagalog, mas magarbo ba ang red vestment than the white vestment that you mentioned?
Yes, it is. Because you don't just put plain red. There are many difficult parts of that part. But when you just put white, it's just white.
And Father Francis, where does he wish to be buried, if you know, according to his instructions?
Yes, the Mary Major, the Basilica, because he said the icon of the Blessed Virgin Mary, since he became Pope, was always helping him in his papacy, in his papacy. So he wanted to be buried there, not in that crypt. So the wake will happen in the St. Peter's Basilica. But the funeral itself, when he gets buried, he wants the Mary Major. So, Santa Maria Maggiore, at the Italy. So that is his wish.
And Father Francis, sorry, I didn't hear you clearly. His wish is to be buried specifically in what country?
In Italy,
Still in Italy,
in Rome,
in Rome. Okay.
Basilica. St. Mary Major. Yes. It's a basilica.
It's a basilica. Okay. Is there any leeway?
Yes, that icon of the Blessed Virgin.
Okay. Is there any leeway for popes as to where they choose to be buried, or does it have to be within Italy?
Well, it has to be in Rome. It has to be in Rome. Because that is the seat of his papacy. Now, the pontiff is called the Supreme Pontiff. What does that mean? It means he is, well, I want to put a secular term, the big boss. Although he always says to be the leader is a servant, like Jesus. So he can decide, except doctrinal. A pope cannot say no to the doctrine. But because it's done ex cathedra, that means all the cardinals, they debated on this, they decided this, they prayed to the Holy Spirit, and then it becomes a doctrine. But all else, he can decide, especially what kind of funeral he wants, where he will be buried. But of course, it's somewhere in Rome.
It has to be in Rome. Okay, thank you so much, Father Francis Lucas. It was really wonderful to hear from you and get insights from your knowledge.
Okay, thank you very much also, Atty. Karen, and all your listeners and viewers. God bless you all.
God bless you, sir. We'll have Dr. Vicencio Balano when At the Forefront returns after a short break. Welcome back at the Forefront. With us this morning is the program chair of the PUP Master's Degree Program in Sociology, Dr. Vicencio Balano. Good morning, Dr. Ven.
Good morning, Atty. Karen and televiewers.
Dr. Ven, how has the death of Pope Francis affected all the Catholics around the world?
He's the head of the Catholic Church, so he's the successor of Saint Peter, the first Pope. Of course, it saddens everyone. He's the head of the church. But at the same time, if there is death, there's new life. So maybe the next Pope can continue his legacy and bring brighter future for the Catholic Church. So we should all be hopeful for this.
How did his death struggles shape his final years as the head of the Catholic Church?
Well, Pope Francis is very determined to introduce a lot of innovations within the church. When you say innovation, it is not changing radically the system, but introducing something within the system. Now, we'll discuss about synodality later on. So this is very important for the Catholic Church.
So you think that despite the health challenges, this did not in any way deter all the reforms and initiatives he had for the Catholic Church?
Yes, it's so surprising. He was in the hospital. He was, I think, signing a decree to continue the next synod of synodality. So his body is weak, but his spirituality was so strong. So,
And you have a bunch of books there, Dr. Ven. So
Yes.
since we're talking about synodality, you have here the first book I'm looking at is the Pope Francis's Synod on Synodality and Modern Sociology. What does that mean, synod?
synod means a meeting or a congregation of bishops with the Pope to address urgent issues in the Catholic Church, how it addresses the contemporary world. So once in a while, the Pope will call a synod. But this time, he introduced something new to the synod. Originally, the synod, when it was institutionalized by Pope Paul VI, the participants are only the Pope, unselected bishops around the world. This time, it includes all the laity, the religious, priests, bishops, including himself, part of that assembly and trying to share and feel as a church. He really wants to make the church more intimate. To
So basically,
everyone.
synod means bringing
Yeah.
people into the Catholic Church.
Yes, and addressing the current issues in the church in relation to society. But he wants to include all, to consult all in synodality. No? So he's bringing something new. Usually it's hierarchical. The synod is only for bishops. And the Pope, this time, he includes all types of members in the Catholic Church. So this is something new. Some would say it's too radical because it takes away some power of the hierarchy. But if you look at it, he still maintains the hierarchical structure of the church. At the same time, introducing something new.
So in terms of that method, if we look at an analogy, parang merong stakeholder consultation.
Yes,
That's like synodality.
yes, and the stakeholders are not only the bishops, but only the lay people, including the LGBTQ Catholics are represented in that synod. So all those that are marginalized, voiceless in the Catholic Church, that's what Francis wanted to reach out. He is a pope of the peripheries, of the poor and marginalized. That's why he is also friendly to the marginalized LGBTQI Catholics. So, why? He has students who were gays when he was still a Jesuit scholastic teaching in Buenos Aires. And he continued the friendship, even he was a pope. No wonder he is friendly to the gays, LGBTQI community. Because you cannot just judge them from the outside, but you have to learn intimately their life, their struggle, before you will truly accept them in the Catholic Church as children of God.
So since we've talked about LGBTQ as being part of that synod, there's also a book here on LGBTQ inclusivity, homosexuality, and same-sex marriage in the Catholic Church. And you wrote this book also, and you wrote this, refers to Pope Francis' synodal theology, sociology, and moral issues. So what is the stand of Pope Francis when it comes to the LGBTQ community? And how did he change the approach of the Catholic Church with respect to this sector?
Well, he was really the first pope to be friendly and reaching out to the LGBTQI. His predecessors were traditionalists, who were have this strong feeling against the homosexuals, because in the Catholic Church it follows the theory of natural law. That this is a Stoic pagan philosophy that was adopted in the Catholic Church, very dominant in the Catholic moral teachings. So how can you accept? I'm writing now a current book. There is dilemma for Pope Francis. He wants to accept all the LGBTQI, but the theoretical framework of the Catholic Church on natural law only accepts binary sexuality and gender.
Yes, and this is in the Bible, Dr. Ven,
Yes.
right? Like, even if you look at Genesis, it states there that God created man and woman. So it's very specific. And usually a lot of those who would argue that there should only be two genders would cite passages in the Bible that only refers to the creation of man and woman. What is the
It's,
take of
yeah.
the synodality of Pope Francis then when it comes to inclusivity of LGBTQ community? Well, actually here it's more inclusive. LGBTQI and
Plus.
also plus, and also same-sex marriage. Is that
Yes.
in the end something that could be reconciled?
Well, it's really, as I've said, the Bible is not a scientific book. It is a spiritual book. There are two authors, divine author and the human author. Now, I mentioned here, this is not, of course, I'm trying to introduce something new, not to contradict the church doctrines, but trying to see the alternative that there are empirical issues on chapter 2 of Genesis, whether really God intended, the divine author, that when he created he created man and woman, humanity, there are only two genders. Or is it from the point of the human author, who is also conditioned by his or her culture, Jewish culture, which is patriarchal, that only accepts binary, male and female. So I'm trying to try to challenge that interpretation with the hope of, because that is the crux why the LGBTQI cannot be accepted, because they are gender diverse, non-binary sexuality and gender identity.
So, Dr. Van, would you say that Pope Francis was able to accomplish what he wanted to do when it comes to the church's policy with respect to the LGBTQ community?
Not yet. But his synodality is opening up new avenues, because especially his inductive synodal theology that requires we should start with human experience. With the LGBTQI, for instance, but how do they feel as a non-binary person? You have to be intimate. You have intimate knowledge about them, rather than judge them from the outside and said, you are not following the binary natural law, and condemn them.
And then the other area that was also controversial was the issue on clerical sexual abuse.
Yes.
And Pope Francis in the past had apologized publicly for this. So what was Pope Francis' stand when it comes to clerical sexual abuse?
Actually, I wrote 2 books on that. These are scholarly books. No, they are not trade books. They are meant to contribute to research and change public policy, ecclesial policy. Now, this is the first book that I dedicated to Pope Francis. This is Routledge. This is an international
In defense of married
Yes.
priests. So are you saying that
that is
priests under the Catholic Church should be allowed to get married? Was that something that the church under Pope Francis was considering?
Yes. I have another book in celibacy, seminary formation, and Catholic clerical sexual abuse. Now, what's the connection? I'm trying to say that we have to reform seminary training, clerical training. And Pope Francis wanted that, because you cannot, as I argue in the other book, that you cannot put young men in a seminary exclusive, away from the normal socialization with women, etc., for 10 years, and then you ordain them and assign them in an autonomous parish where there is no longer supervision from the seminary fathers. That's a problem, because based on part of this and the other book, based on the study, the number one, clerical sexual abuser are not really gays or pedophiles. They constitute only around 6% of the total clerical sexual abuse. But the number one, based on consistent research studies, are the heterosexual priests, who are sexually and psychologically immature, because you put them inside the seminary for 10 years. That's why I'm recommending that let them live a normal life with the same training, spiritual training. Apprenticeship is really the original means of clerical training since the apostles, but it was cut during the medieval period and put them into one remote.
So prior to the
institution.
medieval period, it was allowed, and it was something that Pope Francis was also looking into, changing the way that we train the cleric.
Yes, actually. Because there are married priests in the Catholic Church now, in the US, around 200. In the beginning, there are really two vocations for the priesthood, married and celibate. And Christ said, celibacy is a rare gift. So it is not given to all. But what happens...
Nor is it mandated
Yes.
before.
Yes, it's in the Bible. So if you cannot take celibacy, then you have to be married. At the beginning, there are two types of priests, married priest and celibate priest. So if you look at the logic, if celibacy is a rare gift, it is not given to all who wants to become priest.
Yeah,
so the majority should be married priests,
Yeah. So
heterosexual.
Pope Francis was open to all of these
Yes.
changes. How did Pope Francis then reshape the image of the papacy, given all of these revolutionary reforms that he was trying to introduce?
He's considered a disruptor, some would say. He wants to shake up the system. But for me, he's really an innovator in the Catholic Church. He's not trying to radically change the Catholic Church, no, in the structure. In fact, he's faithful to the doctrine and the natural law. That's why there is a dilemma. How will he fully accept LGBTQI if he maintains the doctrine that is binary based on natural law? He has to shift to sociological, social sciences that recognizes gender diversity in society, non-binary. So I think that I hope the next Pope will share his vision, and I'm sure if there's death, there's new life. So we will more
And
appreciate.
how symbolic that his death came in also on
Yes.
Easter in other parts of the world. Pope Francis's reforms could take some time, but how far do you think he was able to go in the 13 years of his term?
I think he has introduced a lot of reforms in 13 years. No, he was elected already in his 70s, so old Pope. But he was able to accomplish. Look at this, he was so sickly. Part of his lung was removed, and yet he survived up to 88 years.
Yeah.
So God has a mission for him.
Yeah,
No?
that's true, no? So was he sickly even before becoming Pope because of the fact that part of his lung was removed
Yes.
when he was younger?
I think so. But spirituality is a strong force within the person. If you can overcome physical limitations if you have a strong spirituality.
Yeah.
And he is really, I think he's a living saint
Yes.
in my view. That's why I really mourn his death, because these books and two more forthcoming are related to his inductive theology, that we have to encourage social sciences in the Catholic
So
Church.
that's the meaning of
Yes.
inductive theology.
Yes.
Using social sciences
Yes.
to
To
interpret
help
or
theology.
to help theology.
Yes. Because you have to learn the human experience, behavioral patterns of people, especially in the contemporary world. It's so complex with digital cyberculture. It's not enough to have philosophy and theology. You have to have further studies and introduce sociology and social
And Dr.
sciences.
Ben, was it only Pope Francis that inspired you to write this much books?
Yes, for
among
at
the
least.
popes, yeah.
Yes, and I think it will continue the synodality. That's why I see myself. My vocation is to. If Pope Francis is introducing synodality innovation, I'm trying to introduce sociological perspectives of synodality. No, because most of the research and literature are on the theological, philosophical side. I am introducing a different perspective that is empirical, based on experience and current research.
Were you able to send any of your books to Pope Francis when he was still
Yes,
alive?
this one.
So he has a copy of
Yes, to his residence in Casa Santa Marta. The editorial assistant of Routledge would say, this is the first time I would send a copy to the Pope. Where's his address? So you see, and it was really dedicated to him, and the other books dedicated to him, because it's all about synodality of Pope Francis. So it is a big thing for the church. I hope the next Pope will continue that process, no? Inclusivity.
When it comes to global politics, what do you see as the influence of Pope Francis on that level?
Well, as the Pope, he is really the moral leader of the world, no? He envisions a universal Catholic church that involves everybody, inclusive church. No matter whatever is your religion, you are part of that church that includes all. You can be saved, you are part of the church, even if you are not non-Catholic. There's a hierarchy of levels of the level of salvation. Christ saved humanity during his death, passion, and resurrection. As long as a person has goodwill, even if he doesn't believe in God, he has goodwill, the good of humanity, there is, according to the church, there is a possibility of salvation.
Is this according to the church
Yes,
under Pope
Vatican II.
Francis?
Even Vatican II. And Pope Francis is just trying to implement that. An inclusive church. Everybody should be part of it. You welcome everybody regardless of sexuality and gender. You don't discriminate people. If you want to understand them, you have to have intimate interaction and relationship with them to understand them.
And speaking of politics, the last global leader who had a meeting or was able to see Pope Francis a few hours before he passed away is U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance.
Yes.
Do you have any idea what the discussion was about?
I think because they are Catholics, actually, I think there was a little misunderstanding or conflict of perspective between him and Pope Francis. No, I think he criticized Pope Francis previously before his visit. No, but I think it's really part of his vision of a global church. No, the United States is the powerful country in the world, so you have to welcome all. What is good in Pope Francis is able to adjust whatever is your social status, whether you're poor or rich, everybody is welcome in the church. That is the synodal church, which is the objective of synodality. The ultimate goal of synodality is an inclusive synodal church that welcomes all.
That welcomes all.
Globally. Globally.
But how do you think then is Pope Francis's stand on illegal immigration and the deportations? Because this is one of Trump's main initiatives as soon as he was able to take the presidency. The deportation of illegal immigrants, is that something that you think was brought up in his meeting with Vice President J.D. Vance?
Probably. Because, if you talk about migration, you have to have social sciences and research to understand that. I understand Pope Francis wanted to implement church teaching. The problem is, he is surrounded with philosophers and theologians without the aid of social scientists on the dynamics of migration. Kasi if you allow migrants to enter your country, then the natives will be competing with them, the resources, jobs, etc., right? So how you protect the common good? You protect the common good of native people within your country. And how will you also promote the common good of migrants who are also victims of conflict, wars, right? Poverty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when it comes to understanding the issues that illegal immigrants face, for example, I think Pope Francis has an advantage of also being Latin American himself. Do you think that Pope Francis's Latin American identity influenced his leadership style? But before you answer that question, we'll have to take a short break. At the Forefront, we'll be right back. Welcome back at the Forefront. Dr. Ven, do you think that Pope Francis's identity as Latin American influenced his leadership style?
Yes, because we need perspectives on developing countries. Argentina is one of those developing countries like the Philippines. we should have a view from the global south, right? Latin American countries are mostly Catholic. The largest Catholic country in the world is Brazil, and then Mexico are developing countries. So you need somebody, the leader of the Catholic Church, with membership who are mostly poor, to have a heart with those who are underprivileged. So we hope the next Pope will come from the global south, developing countries, or maybe from the Philippines.
Well, did you also follow like who is a possible next pope? Because in our prior interview of you here in February,
Yeah.
we previously identified 7 possible papa bills here at the forefront. And we went through their profiles, whether they're conservative, traditional, or progressive. But recently, Al Jazeera reported that the 3 strongest contenders are Ghana's Peter Turkson, the Philippines' very own Cardinal Luis Tagle, and Hungary's Peter Erdo. What's your take on these top 3 choices?
Well, these are just reported in the media. We really don't know who will be elected inside that conclave. It's the Holy Spirit that really determines. But
But is it really the Holy Spirit? I mean, of
there's
course,
human dimension.
Yes.
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 For
Do
me,
they really have an internal politics
Yeah.
among the cardinals as well?
after our first interview, I reflected on this now. And I've said the best successor of Pope Francis should be a Jesuit or Jesuit trained. Because Jesuits have different perspective. They have positive view of the world, right? Of the social sciences. So if you put somebody that is conservative with a different training, it might not continue the legacy of Pope Francis. So among the 3, I think Cardinal Tagle is most likely share the vision of Pope Francis. He's Jesuit trained. He got his degree from Ateneo, right? So this is one of the top.
Is Cardinal Tagle the only Jesuit among the 3 that I mentioned? Peter Turkson, Cardinal Luis Tagle, and then Peter Erdo.
I think so. He's the only Jesuit trained. So,
3 cardinals were appointed by Pope Francis during his term: Orlando Quevedo, Jose Advincula, and Pablo David. Will they also fly to the Vatican for the conclave?
yes, we can participate in 3 conferences before the conclave, but they cannot participate, especially the 2 cardinals are beyond 80 years old.
So that's a very strict rule. Beyond
Yes.
80, you cannot
You cannot
participate
elect in the conclave, but you can participate before the conclave. There are actually 3 conferences. That is where Pope Francis became popular to the cardinals because he spoke about marginalization, about reaching out to the poor, and I've read something that makes him popular to the cardinals before the conclave.
So before the conclave, Pope Francis was not seen as a likely successor to be Pope at that time.
Actually, Pope Francis has got the second highest vote after Pope Benedict XVI. No? Right? So some cardinals already knew his lifestyle, his simplicity, his vision about the poor. And then when Pope Benedict XVI resigned, he was thinking of Pope Francis. Have you seen, I think, the movie about the 2
Conclave.
popes?
Yeah. The 2 popes.
Yes,
Yes,
I have seen that. Probably there is. That Pope Benedict probably saw the potential of Pope Francis to reform the church. They reform the bureaucracy of the Catholic Church in Vatican. You see, that's why the Pope Francis was very strong against corruption, right? So he was trying to reform the bureaucracy of the church. And he's really, sabi nga nila, stubborn. He has that personality. You need that for a strong leader. Because there are so many resistance. The Catholic Church is divided among conservatives and progressives. The predecessors of Pope Francis were known conservatives.
And Dr. Ven, since Pope Francis was known to be a person that lived very simply, I think he even refused to stay at the
Yes,
the traditional papal residence
Yes,
to live
palace.
in a more simple
Yes.
accommodation.
Guest in the guest room.
Yes, exactly. Didn't want to live in the papal
Yes.
palace. Was also part of his initiative to bring more. He wanted to reduce bureaucracy, you said. But did he also want to bring more austerity when it came to the church finances? One of his initiatives was also reviewing the church finances.
Yes, he was really trying also to encourage the cardinals and the popes and the bishops to live a simple life. Actually, he reduced the allowances of cardinals. So some really resisted that, no? Because Pope Francis have seen corruption, all these sales of property that deprive the church of the resources and funds, right? So it's really a reform in the Catholic Church within and outside the church by Pope Francis. 13 years with that impact, with that reform. So God must have been sent him, I'm sure, that he was elected to do precisely to do this, to reform the church.
And with respect to those that will fly from the Philippines, apart from the 3 cardinals that we mentioned earlier that were selected by Pope Francis during his term, who do you think will also have to fly to the Vatican for the conclave?
From the Philippines?
Yes, from the Philippines.
Well,
Meron
some
pa bang
bishops.
iba na kailangan?
Yeah,
Mga
some
bishops
bishops,
also?
papal nuncio probably, but they are not directly participating in the conclave or pre-conferences before the conclave. But some could come to the Vatican, especially to mourn and to the burial of Pope Francis. So this is really the whole church affair. I hope it should not focus only on the Vatican, because the Catholic Church consisted of 1.3 billion, and the majority are lay people.
Yes.
So how do we consult them about this?
Yes. Dr. Ven, you initially shared with us the resistance as well from some of the
Yes.
more traditional cardinals during the term of Pope Francis. What do you think would be the challenges that would be faced by the next Pope?
I've said that conservatism is a result of the lack of social sciences, of understanding what's going on with the empirical world. That's why I always recommend clerical training, reform in clerical training, especially education of priests. That they should not only specialize in philosophy, but the social sciences, sociology, especially in the college level. And then in theology, there must be what I espouse as sociological theology,
So really
rather
a
than
change
philosophy.
also
Yes,
in the
mindset.
method.
Yes.
But Dr. Ven, last question, do you see any chance that the church would swing to the other side, or as you say, other extreme? So we're coming from a more progressive stance under the term of Pope Francis. You called him a disruptor, or a lot of people call him as a disruptor. Do you think that this could go to the other side again of going back to a more traditional approach?
Yes, God forbids. Because there are many conservatives in the church. As I've said, the church is divided right now between conservatives and progressives. And Pope Francis represents the progressive side. There are many candidates to the papacy now who are conservatives. I will not mention them, but they really wanted to return to the old status quo of the Catholic Church.
And more traditional stance again.
That's a possibility, but I'm sure God will not allow that.
Dr. Ved, do you see any possible dark horse candidate or surprise candidate that was similar to Pope Francis, that, a lot suddenly out of the blue, and also in the movie Conclave,
Yes.
di ba, merong candidate doon that came out of the blue. Do you see that happening in this coming conclave?
Yes, everything is possible, and especially if they keep on voting, but for how many days no one is elected, so they will be forced to choose 2 popular candidates. And from there, they will vote who among the 2 will get 2/3 and will be elected. So it's possible, but most of the cardinals now are appointed by Pope Francis. So there is really a possibility that a progressive pope will come after him. So, this
It
really
will
for
be
the
interesting to
category.
see how this shapes up in the
Yes.
upcoming days. But thank you so much, Dr. Van.
Yes, my pleasure.
And good luck with writing your new books.
Yes, thank you also for inviting me.
As the world grieves the loss of a shepherd who took time to walk with the poorest and spoke to the hearts of many, the memory of Pope Francis will continue to inspire compassion and courage among the faithful. His passing leaves not just a vacant seat in the Vatican, but silence felt deeply across the world. In remembering his life and legacy, may the Catholic Church find the strength and unity in the days to come. Be timely informed, be insightful of the news, always stay at the forefront. And before we say goodbye, another news broke out this morning with the passing of showbiz icon, the kilabot na mga kolehiyala in the 70s, Haji Alejandro. He's the fifth showbiz veteran whose death sent another wave of shock to the industry this year. Just as the funeral march of Filipino national artist Nora Honor is undergoing as of this time. Bilyonaryo News Channel is sending our heartfelt condolences to the families of the late Nora Honor and Haji Alejandro. Join us again tomorrow for conversations that hit the heart, mind, and soul. This is Attorney Karen Jimeno. Thank you for spending your hour with us.